how I mute myself.
Hi parents, if your music is too loud, you can actually adjust the slider button on the mute icon to reduce it a little. Oh, hi Andrew. There.
Hey, hi. Good evening, parents. Wow, parents are
They're
on
even
the
in
dot,
before you.
11:20. Wow, I thought it's 11:20 now. Hi, parents. I'm Andrew here, and we have Teacher Sherwin and Teacher May. Yep, I think Teacher Sherwin has given some instruction, right? If the music is too loud for you, you can go to the bottom, I think bottom middle or the left, there's actually a volume function to lower the volume. Do you have to bring it up? Okay. So that you can. Yeah, if not, then you will not be able to hear me very well. Okay, hi parents. Nice to have all of you here. You're very early, and I think it's always good to be early. So those who have just entered the classroom, you can actually adjust the volume at the bottom left. I think it should be the bottom left-hand corner. Oh, I'm actually the assistant teacher. I have all the function on the right.
Yeah, so you're given the crown, so you have all the functions.
Okay, right. Hi. Hello, parents. Nice to see you. Some of you know how to turn off your screen, so you're not on the screen, but it'll be nice to see your faces. Like Hannah Yo, is it? Or Mrs. Yo? I don't know. The rest of the parents are shy. Yeah, but it'd be nice. Hey, hello. So nice to see some faces, you know. Hi, Javier. You're Javier or Javier's
Mom.
Oh, sorry. It's mom. Hello. Can I have the music, shall we? Yeah, because you're not started yet. Okay, parents, nice to have you here. We can have yeah, you can lower the volume or the volume really strong.
Are you on the
Okay, we can hear your parents' background. Okay, we can. Right, thank you. Okay, hi parents, I'm Andrew, and I will start off the session at 11:30, so we are early. If the music is too loud for those who just came in, because I think the parents are just coming in by the minute, you can actually lower the volume at the bottom left. And for the rest of the parents, if you need to speak or you want to say something, there are two ways about doing this. On the bottom right hand corner, there is actually a raised hand, virtual hand icon. So you can actually try it now, right? So you can see that on my screen now, you can raise your hand. Maybe you can try it now, parents. Wow, I can see that one hand. Okay, anyone maybe would like to try? On the bottom right hand, there's a raise hand, virtual hand icon. So when you do that later on, we will pause for a while if you have time, and you can actually speak. Okay, again, for parents who just came in, you can lower the volume if it's too loud, the music, so that you can hear me. We will turn off the music at 11:30 when we start. So again, at the bottom right-hand corner, there's a raise hand icon. And on the right-hand side, you can see three icons. You can put on the slides for the icon. Oh, I think I have. Okay, adjust. Okay, since you are here, are there words on this slide? Oh, yes. Okay, so hi parents, for those who just came in, we're just running through some functions of the classroom platform. You're not able to speak now because there are so many of you. We'll be able to hear a lot of background sound, noises and all that. Okay, so you can only hear me now. But if you need to speak and say something, you can raise hand on, virtual hand on the bottom right. Okay, and maybe we can try, for some of you who just came in, you can press the icon for the virtual hand. And then on the right hand side, you also see a text box. This one. Okay, so you can actually click onto this and then maybe say hi on the chat box on the hi icon. Yes. Qing Yi, that is Xiao Qin. Yeah, just say hi to everybody. Happy to see you here. Oh, wonderful. Parents are getting the action. Okay, some of the parents here are our, already children attending TCHER, so they should be quite familiar and they have their children to assist them, right? So the children are our students. They should be very familiar by now. Okay, so hi, you can chat here. Okay, now at any time, you can go to this icon and also ask question. So let's go to the question box on the right side. You can say any questions you have. Okay, so if you have any questions at any point of time, you can click onto this question box and type something just next to the chat box. Oh, hello parents and cheers. hello, very nice to see all of you here. Okay, we have a few more minutes. So it'd be good to get yourself familiar with all the functions, because later on we wouldn't really have a lot of time. Right, it's quite short, 1 hour 15 minutes. Yesterday we ran it by like 1 hour 30 minutes. Okay, but you can leave anytime if you need to. Okay, so hi. So parents are still coming in. Hello parents who just came in. I'm Andrew and welcome to the parent workshop. Okay, so I'll be starting off first, just a quick introduction at 11:30 sharp. And then after that, okay, the background music is loud. You can actually adjust. For those parents who just came in, go to the bottom left. You can see probably the PowerPoint is blocking the music icon. Shall we? Any chance to make it smaller? I don't know whether they can. You should be able to adjust the volume, parents. Oh yeah, thank you. Right, got it, Hazel. Thank you. So that you can hear me. Anyway, we'll be turning off the music in a short while. Okay, the other thing that you can do now is if you can't see me because you're opening up the chat box, you can actually lower and drag the chat box down so that you can see the presenter, and then at the same time you can chat and ask questions. Okay, is everyone okay? So parents, I know some parents are still coming in. I can actually check. We have 29 parents now. All right, and some are still coming in. Okay, so I'm gonna take a screenshot for you. This way you can try and pull down your chat box. Okay, or Sharon can. Let me see. No. So everybody can see me? Okay, hi parents. Those parents, if you just came in. Hi, I'm Andrew. I'm going to start the whole session, and I was just trying to share with the parents that here, this icon is where you can chat with us and ask questions. You can't really speak now because there are so many of you. There'll be a lot of background sound, music, noises and all that. Okay, so go into this. Sorry, later you help me erase a bit. Right, so you can say hi at the chat box and also ask a question. And if the music is too loud, you can actually adjust. Okay, we have 1 more minute to spare and then we will start. And hi to parents, if you're, especially those parents, your children are already attending TCHER. Hello parents, and also those who are new to us. Okay, so when we have TCHER lessons, we always ask the students to come early and we'll play this music. Okay, now it's 11:30. Hello parents, nice to meet you. Hello, good to see some faces. on the screen, and some of you familiar faces of parents because your kids are already with TCHER. The rest of you, you are quite smart because you know how to off your screen. I cannot really see your faces, but of course, if you can, turn on your camera so that you can say hi to each other. Okay, at any point of time, you need to speak or you want to ask a question, you can raise your virtual hand, right? You can see this virtual hand icon on the bottom right, and also chat with us, or you can ask questions. Yeah, some of you are already asking some questions, like how to turn the music off. Okay, we have already turned off the music because we are starting now, okay? Right, so thank you very much, parents, for this for coming to this workshop. We're actually very excited and very happy that you're here with us, right? We really took a lot of time to prepare for this workshop, right? We just want to bless you. We just want to give you some information and also answer questions that you may have, right? To the best of our ability. If you cannot answer, we will let you know, and we will find out for you if we can, find out the answers. Right, and we are just happy that you're here with us to join us for an hour or so. Okay, so let me move on. So I will do a very quick introduction. I'm Andrew, started TCHER.com, and it's run by myself and a team of ex-MOE educators, all very, very outstanding. Yeah, very, very, very blessed to have so many of us and so many of them with us in TCHER, right? So we truly love teaching, although we are running this as a business, but really our hearts are for the students and for the value add to the students' learning. Okay, then after that, I'm going to invite Jobeth, and then after that, May for English and Math, and then Sherwin for Science. Right, at any point, you need to ask question. Again, for those who just came in, you can raise your virtual hand, and we can actually pull you on stage like this. Let me see whether can I pull Sharon.
Jobeth.
Oh no, I can't.
Only Sherwin can.
Oh, I see. Okay, so we can actually put you on stage.
I put you here.
Right, that's what we do
your name.
for our student.
Oh, you disappear.
And then you can actually ask a question. We can have a conversation. Okay, thank you, Jobeth. You can also ask question on the chat box or on the right side, and you can also chat with us. Okay, so I will just hand over this time to Jobeth for the English part, and later I'll come back on again to talk about supporting a child through PSLE. We also understand this period is really, really tough and difficult for everyone because of the circuit breaker. You have to be at home, your kids are at home. Okay, so we just hope that everybody is having a good time, but also, to keep safe. Okay, thank you. Right, Jobeth, thank you.
Hi, good morning, parents. It's nice to see so many faces, although I guess some of your cameras are turned off. Usually we see a lot of small children, so it's very different to see adults on screen. Okay, so I'm not going to run through the this introduction anymore because I think Andrew has covered it. I am losing my voice a little bit because I've been teaching for the whole morning and yesterday as well, so bear with me. Okay, so today basically what we're going to talk about is how to tackle the PSLE, or some very basic tips on what some parents are concerned about for English. Okay, so these three things that you see on the screen: empathetic communicators, discerning readers, as well as creative inquirers. These are actually not my goals, these are MOE goals. Okay, so this is actually from the MOE syllabus, what they want to achieve through English. So we try at TCHER to support these goals and these objectives. And through our teaching, we want to make sure that they can achieve all these. Okay, so this is the breakdown of the English paper, right? Which I'm sure most of you should be familiar with. There is the paper one, which is sit writing and continuous writing. So for sit writing, it's usually a letter or an email or report. MOE is trying very hard to be more functional. So they want to teach skills and that are actually more usable and user-friendly in real life. So they want them to be able to write emails, to write letters, to write reports. Because as we all know, I think none of you actually write compositions in your daily life in your job. We don't write compos. So situational writing is really valuable in the sense of real-world achievable objectives. Okay, so paper 2, you've got your booklet A, which is mostly MCQ, and then booklet B, which is your close, editing, compre-close, synthesis and transformation, as well as your open-ended compre. Of course, then we have our paper 3, paper 4, which are listening, compre, and oral, which are actually coming up quite soon. And I think our paper 1 and 2 is only in about 160 days more for primary 6 students. Okay, so what I want to ask you today, as a parent, which part of the English exam are you most concerned about? So there'll be an answering device appearing on the screen very shortly. Okay, can you pick for me, if you think, for example, situational writing is your the biggest thing that for you, that you think your child needs the most help, pick A. If you think compo is the most important, then pick B. You can pick more than one, so as many as you feel like is important, just select those and then click on submit your answer. Okay, I'll give you guys about 30 seconds to pick your answers. So this is actually how we also run our questioning during class. There will be an answering device on screen so that kids can select. We usually play some music so they can, feel a bit relaxed while they answer questions. Yes, you just click the options on the screen. So on the selector on the screen, you should be able to see a selector with the options A to G. So you just click on the ones that you feel are most concerning to you, and then click on submit my answer. Okay. So I think most of you, shall we know most of the answers in already?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Can you just close it for me? Great. Okay, so I can see that most people's answers, oh, it's gone. Most people put in B and F. Okay, so B and F are the most concerning components to most parents out there. Okay, so B and F being compo and compre, I've actually kind of predicted your answers. Most parents are indeed concerned about compo and compre. It's the biggest worry to most parents out there. The thing is that compo and compre takes up 30% of the English marks, which actually, when you look at the big picture, 30% is not the majority of the marks. So why are parents so concerned about compo and compre? We really need to also think about the other 70%, which is mostly MCQ. So we really don't want kids to focus too much on the two big C's, as we call them, and kind of forget all the easier to score MCQ questions out there that they are not practicing enough. Okay, so grammar, if you look at the paper, grammar is actually what is tested in 90% of the English paper. Everything except listening compre. Everything else actually tests grammar. So grammar is really, really important. We don't want the kids, again, to be too single-mindedly focused on compo and compre and then kind of neglect everything else. So for all of us, I think if we have been through the English system, the primary school system in Singapore 20, 30 years ago, probably 20 plus years ago, if you've been through our local system back then, grammar was not explicitly taught. Okay, so for us, our generation, a lot of us didn't learn words like verbs and adjectives and past participles. We were not told what all these terms mean. We were taught to kind of just pick it up as we go along. But now today, the stellar objectives for English is very much focused on grammar, okay, to teach them explicit grammar and to make sure that they have mastered all these basics before they move on, okay? So what I want to share is some common mistakes that students make. Now, this is really, really important. If we have this knowledge, if we know the kind of mistakes that the students tend to make, not only from previous years of primary school, but from previous batches of PSLE students, we are already equipped with this information. We really need to share it with the kids so that they learn from their predecessors, don't make the same mistakes, especially when it pops up every single year. All right, so these are some of the common errors that kids make. Okay, the first one is that students don't know what they are checking for. So a lot of the times, we as teachers, as parents, we tell our kids, go and check your work, go and check your work, make sure you've checked. But the kids don't know what they are checking for, right? They look at their paper, they kind of read through the whole thing, they look and say, okay, I have answered this question and this question, I've put in answers for everything, okay, I'm done, I have checked. But they are not checking effectively, they're not checking for certain things that are important. So that's really, really, really something to look out for. All right, this is my major bugbear for me as a teacher, that students answer based on memory. So for English, what this means is that they are given a compre passage, for example, and then they have to answer a question based on this compre passage. Now, because they have just read this compre passage and they are very confident in their own abilities to remember what they have read, they put in their answer based on memory instead of flipping back to the passage, checking their answer, transferring their answer methodically, and then making sure that it is correct. So a lot of the time they miss out key terms, or they copy the spelling incorrectly, or they copy a tense incorrectly. And for me, that's really egregious because the answer is right there. You know, it's right there in the paper. It's not something that they need to memorize. So really, kids have to learn to depend on flipping back and forth. A lot of them don't like to do this, but to flip back and forth. So even for synthesis and transformation, when we look at the changing of sentences, what's even worse is that the question is right above the lines that they write down their answers on, but they can still leave out words, they still leave out tenses, they still leave out keywords. It's really quite distressing for me as a teacher. So when I point this out to students, they're like, oh yeah, why did I leave this out? Check. Okay, this is something that they need to check for. All right, the third thing, of course, is that our kids answer very quickly. Again, very confident in their abilities. They really are very sure that they have the right answer. So they don't go through that process. They don't think about the method of getting the answer. They just go with their gut feeling. Okay, although our gut feelings can be very useful, we also need them to be very methodical, which is something I'm sure my maths and science teachers will espouse as well. Okay, so the last thing is that students don't know what the questions are actually asking for. So if they don't know what the question is asking for, they won't give the correct response. All right, so these are all very typical errors that they make. So what I would like to share with you also is this compo. So to kind of go through everything that I've been saying, if you read this compo, if you take the time, maybe about 2 or 3 minutes just to read through, it's not a complete compo, it's just, I think, the first 5 paragraphs. But as you read this compo, what is your instinct as a parent? After reading this, do you think that this is an exemplary compo? Yes, no, or not sure? The answering device should pop up on the screen very shortly. Yes, okay, it's right there. So pick A, yes, if you think it is a model compo, it's a great compo, you wish your kids would write compos like this. Pick B, if you think, no, I don't think this is the best, could be improved a lot more. And if you're really not sure, you can go ahead and pick C. Okay, so again, I'll give you about 2 minutes just to read and then answer the question. And I'll play some music for you while you think. Okay, so answers are coming in. Kind of varied answers here. Okay, Sherwin, if at any time you find that the answers are mostly in, I think you can just close it. No problem.
All right. Just a while more.
Thanks.
Maybe at a minute. I think they're fine there.
Okay, thanks for all your answers. I see that most of you, in fact, are giving the answer B, so that the answer is that most of you think that no, this is not an exemplary compo, but we still have 15 parents who do think that yes, this is an exemplary compo. Now, I'm sure you're all very curious to find out what the answer is. This is actually a composition that I have shared with the kids for the primary 6 kids at the beginning of the module that we're covering, which is compo. And just like you, a lot of them thought this was a good compo, but in actual fact, it's not. Okay, so just like you, I'm sure a lot of the kids were surprised, like, what? This is the kind of compo that I would want to write. Okay, there are, not to say it's a terrible compo, it is a reasonably okay composition. I would never say it's good or a model compo or exemplary. There are many errors in it that have to be corrected. Many things in there that need to be changed. If you can just buzz for me in the chat box and tell me, what do you think then is wrong with this compo, or what can be improved? Maybe we put it this way. What do you think can be improved about this composition? So if you can type into the chat box for me, what are some of your thoughts? What do you think is my issue or the marker's issue would be with this composition? Anyone has any ideas? If you want to raise your hand. You can also speak. We can get you down on the stage. Otherwise, you can just type into the chat box. What are some things about this composition that need to be corrected or need to be changed or edited or improved? What are some things there? Anybody? You type for me, parents. Less disjointed, less abrupt. Yes, it is quite abrupt. Like it kind of jumps very quickly into certain topics. Like from the first paragraph to the second paragraph, there's a bit of a jump. Jordan, yes, thank you. Yes, that is the word I use too. It is very bombastic. So we find that, in Singapore, what do we say? We say chim, right? They are very complicated words that are not necessarily the best options. There are too many difficult words. I try not to use the word difficult because I do want them to use slightly more difficult vocab, but in the sense that the words that I use are actually not appropriate for the way it is being used here. So a lot of words that are used in this compo are not appropriate. They sound really strange. They sound like they're just stuffed in. Yes, you're right that there are too many ideas, not much characterization. You find that there are a lot of repeated phrases like ring, ring, the school bell rang, the red van screeched, the red van screeched. Certain words that I use that actually are not appropriate, like two stalwart men. When you're talking about bad guys, you wouldn't use a positive word to describe them. So, and especially my favorite here, vociferated, which is not a word that most people use in daily life. So we do find that kids memorize vocab lists. And when they memorize vocab lists, they kind of stuff these words back into their compo without really thinking how appropriate they are, how well they fit. It doesn't really sound appropriate anymore. So we really want them to be able to write fluently, to be able to write and showcase that they have a good command of the English language. Okay, so what are some areas that we want to talk about? Firstly, most students have a problem with time crunch. And this is something I think that a lot of teachers don't really address because we give them compositions and we give them an hour to write. And we say, okay, go home and improve your compo some more. Come back the next day, let's do a second draft. Okay, let's correct all the errors in our second draft. Okay, go home and then, exchange with your friends and do peer vetting and all that, which is great for practice, but it doesn't really prepare the kids for the fact that when they go into the exam, they have 45 minutes to look at the paper, read the question, figure out what they need to do, plan their essay, write the whole thing, check the essay in 45 minutes. Okay, so what happens usually is that the kids start off really well. They have a really long, complicated backstory. They have a great introduction. And then they look at their watch and they realize they have 15 minutes left. And then they rush through the most important part of the essay. All right, so poor story structure, the essay becomes very bottom heavy. Okay, the next thing that is an issue is that a lot of kids memorize or they regurgitate stories. Now, what's the problem with this? The problem is that it's very obvious to markers. And markers have said this before in reports that they find that students are memorizing stories. They're trying to make them fit. However, the stories that they've memorized do not actually answer the question that they're given. So it's like, the example I like to use is Cinderella. Cinderella's stepsisters, when they're trying to put on the glass slipper, and then the really gruesome first edition of that story talks about how they cut off their heels and they cut off their toes, and they try desperately to get their feet to fit the glass slipper. It never fits. It can never fit. And it's very obvious to anyone looking at these poor stepsisters shoving their feet into a glass slipper. It's never going to work. Okay, so it's very clear to the marker. And of course, as you guys have mentioned before, bombastic vocabulary, it fits awkwardly. They have a lot of idiomatic errors. What do I mean by idiomatic? That means they try to use a phrase, a good phrase, but they can't quite remember what the exact phrase is, so they change it a little bit. Like, for example, instead of saying raining cats and dogs, they may say cats and fish are coming down from the sky. I had one before where the student was trying to say kill 2 birds with 1 stone. And the student wrote, hit a bird on the head with a stone. Things like this. So it becomes a little bit twisted, a little bit strange. It's very clear to the examiner that they're not quite sure what they're writing. Okay. And of course, overuse stock phrases. It means they always use the same kinds of phrases that are taught in writing centers or in model compos that are overused, like all of a sudden or out of the blue, raining cats and dogs is another example. Okay, so I really want to remind parents, I think we shouldn't stress ourselves out about kids writing really complicated, difficult, interesting, complex stories. Students are not expected to be best-selling novelists in Singapore. Okay, it would be very unfair of the PSLE to be kind of examining students on how famous an author they're going to be. Not possible. So what do we want them to do? Very simple. Answer the question. So if the question is about a gift, you have to write about a gift. If the question is about a betrayal, it needs to be about a betrayal. That's it. Answer the question. Next thing, they need to be logical and realistic. So one example I gave the students is that one kid wrote a story about how his friend tripped and fell over and broke every single bone in his body. And realistically, nobody's ever going to trip and kind of break every bone in his body. And the child wrote a really graphic, interesting description about how bones were sticking out of the skin and it was shattered. And it was very graphic and very well described. But is it realistic? Is it logical? It's not. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so we want the students to have a grasp of logic. Thirdly, of course, grammar. Fourthly, of course, your vocab. And the last thing is that they need to make sure that they have factored in the time limit when they are writing. It has to be a story that can be completed. It can be well fleshed out within that 45 minutes. Okay, so since we've talked about all this, how then can we help our kids to prepare for the exams? So remind them that preparing for an exam, and in fact, a reminder to you parents that preparing for an exam is like training for a marathon. Okay, when we train for a marathon, we don't run a marathon every single week. We don't tell the kids, go out, okay, you're going to be running a 42 km marathon in December, in September, in October. Starting today, we're going to run 42 km every single day, every single weekend. You're going to be exhausted by the time, in just a month or a week, you'll be exhausted. You'll be too tired to go on any further. Not just that, but you won't be able to improve on the parts that you need help in. Okay, so just like an athlete who's preparing for his major goal, whether it is to be in the Olympics or some competition, we always need to train the basics. And I'm sure as any of you are sportsmen or sportswomen, if you know about, for example, playing a sport, we don't just play the sport every week. As a football player, you do drills, you do training, you do all these little things, passing the ball, moving around cones. We want to train the basics so that you improve their overall game. So in the same way, we want to make sure our kids are trained up in the basics, that they practice the basics, that they are familiar with all their small baby steps before they get to that marathon. Okay, so what is one concrete thing? And I know you're all kind of stuck at home right now with your kids, day in, day out, 24 hours, with your children, which is normally not the case. So what is one thing you can do to prepare them, get them to read? And as an English teacher, I cannot stress this more fully, that reading is really the best way for them to practice, to absorb grammar rules, to absorb vocabulary, to kind of understand how stories are crafted, to understand how characters react and act. So reading is really the best way to prepare them. But not just reading, because I have a lot of parents who tell me, yeah, my kids read a lot, but they don't see any results. So we really need to make sure also that their reading is thoughtful. Not just to read, but to get them to write reviews later on. Ask them to reflect. Why did you like this book? Why didn't you like the book? What do you think was bad about it? What was good about it? Do you think that you would have behaved the same way the character behaved? What are some good vocab phrases or words that were used in this book that made you think, wow, that's interesting? If you were the character, would you have done something differently? How would you change the ending of the book? So get them to respond to what they've read instead of just reading and then going on to the next thing and the next thing. The other thing is that it's really important for kids to choose age and level appropriate books. I'm sure parents that you can recognize those characters at the bottom of the screen there. You've got Geronimo Stilton, Dogman, Wimpy Kid, and Captain Underpants. The thing is that a lot of kids are reading books that they would have read at primary 1, primary 2, primary 3 level. At 12-year-old, they're still reading the same kinds of books. They haven't really graduated, they haven't moved on. Okay, so we really, although I'm not saying that you should throw out all these books, any kind of reading is valuable if they're not reading at all. But do try to introduce them or push them towards slightly more difficult books. Introduce them to newer books, get them to look at lists, book lists, ask them to choose for themselves which books do they think are interesting. Look at book covers, look at blurbs, ask them to pick something. What are their friends recommending? Okay, and to move a little bit further on. When I was young, when we were young, Enid Blyton books were really popular. A lot of us would be exchanging Enid Blyton books, The Faraway Tree, The Magic Chair. But my mother would always tell me, stop reading so much Enid Blyton. It's not really helping you. Because when you're so stuck at simple books, you're stuck at the simple vocabulary, you're stuck at simple grammar, you can never move on. So for reluctant readers, if your kids don't like to read, it's really also useful to introduce them to short stories. Why is this so valuable? Number one, short stories are the best model for what they will be reading and writing at the exam. They will be reading short stories at the compre, they'll be reading short stories in closed passage, they'll be writing a short story in their compo segment. So short stories are actually the best kind of model for them to read. It's also good because they can finish it in one day. They don't feel so stressed looking at a thick book and thinking, oh, you know what, if I don't have time to finish reading, or if I get bored halfway, it's a bit hard to get bored halfway through a short story. Okay, so generally they'll finish the whole thing. So short stories are really very useful. Okay, so these are some free resources that you can depend on. Since now MLB is closed, our bookshops are mostly closed, you can't really get any books at home. But what we can do is to give them audiobooks. Audible is actually has actually released all their books for kids, right, free. So you can listen to them for free. It's fine to be getting them to listen to books instead of reading, because listening also practices for their oral and their listening compre. It's a good model for how people should be reading aloud, so oral. It's a good model for how to listen to something and use your listening skills, listening compre. So this is also really good. And a lot of kids also, you can get them to listen and do something else at the same time. Very good parents, you can get them to listen to an audiobook and fold laundry at the same time. Okay, very useful. Right? Get them to be interested. Their ears are engaged, their hands are engaged. Okay, so Libby Library is another resource you can use. It's tied to, I think, our local NLB catalog, so you can use that as well. I think available on Android, on Apple, iPad, desktop, all possible. Storyline Online is a website, so I've included the URL here. Why I like it is that the books are read by celebrities. You might recognize Sean Astin. He was Samwise Gamgee in Lord of the Rings. Okay, so read by celebrities, and then every single book also comes with partner activities. So for example, if they're finished reading the book or listening to the book online, you can then introduce them to the follow-up activities that come along with the book. However, Storyline Online is pitched a little bit lower, so more for like primary 4, primary 5 level. So if you have kids who are reluctant readers, hate reading, not very interested in reading, they're at a slightly lower level, this is a good way to start them off. Okay. So to sum up everything that I've been saying, one good thing to do, one good way to approach your kids' learning is to ask them to analyze past mistakes. Now, as a teacher, when I used to hand out exam papers, the first thing the kids do is look at the marks. Nobody wants to look at their errors. Everybody wants to compare, did I get A, did I get B, what kind of grade did I get, what kind of grades did my friends get? As a parent, it's helpful for you also not to focus on the marks. I think if your kids come back with exam papers, you come back with test papers, don't immediately ask them, hey, so what do you get? You know, because this kind of reinforces and entrenches that kind of attitude towards grades. So ask them to look at the mistakes. What kind of errors did you make? Why did you make these errors? How are you going to fix them? What are you going to do that will make sure you don't make these kinds of errors in future? Are there certain components of the paper that you are struggling with? Are there certain questions that you are finding it particularly difficult? So these are the things that you want to get them to look at, to reflect upon, to figure out what they're doing wrong so they can get better at them. Okay, so practice makes perfect. Like I said, drill the basics. Don't just redo exam papers. I know a lot of parents buy other schools' exam papers and then every week they do a new one, right? So instead of just doing the whole exam paper and then kind of marking it, and then returning it, and then doing another one, you may want to pick certain parts of the paper instead, go through that whole process of doing that section, ask them to check the answers, why did they get them wrong, etc., etc. Okay, just a note for parents as well, the answer schemes that come with these pirated papers are not always accurate because they're usually compiled by people who are not teachers or they're not actually from the schools. So something to take note of. If you find that an answer is dubious to you, please check in with someone else. All right, last thing, to give your kids a list of things to check for. So for example, if they have written a compo for you, ask them to go back, check all your tenses, or go back and check all your spelling. Give them a thing to check for rather than just saying, go back and read, go back and check. Okay, make sure they have a thing to check for. They have a specific error they want to look out for, preferably, of course, based on the specific errors that your kids tend to make. Okay, all right, that's it from me. Let me just take a look at your questions. How do you teach a child reality? Okay, basically the question I always ask them is, could this happen to you? If you fell over, do you think you will break every bone in your body? No, right? If you were to drop your mobile phone on the floor, what would your reaction be? Would you burst into tears and stamp your foot on the floor? No, you just pick it up. You know, things like that. So always ask them to envision themselves in this position, in this story. What would happen to you if this was happening in your real life? So I had just now the story that I went through with you at the beginning, the story about Rachel. I think later on in the story, it talks about how she managed to defeat 2 kidnappers, 2 grown burly men with her own hands because she was a wushu expert. So I asked the kids in return, guys, if you are a primary 5, primary 6 school girl, and I sent 2 burly men to fight with you, do you think, number 1, at primary 5, you can be a wushu expert? Number 2, do you think that a primary 5 school girl who is a wushu expert still can defeat 2 grown, strong men? It's highly unlikely. So ask them to envision themselves in this reality, in this story that they're creating. Would they react this way? Would they do this? Would their siblings do this? Would their friends do this? If not, then it is not logical. Must a compo end up a lesson learned? I would say most of the time, 99.9% of the time, I would say they should, because we prefer them to follow a story arc that has a change or has a development in it. So if they have written a compo that at the end has no change in the main character has not moved anywhere, not learned anything, has not gone through anything that has affected them, then there is no point in that composition. There is no goal, there is nothing that has been achieved. So if you ask them to look at the movies that they watch or the TV shows that they watch, at the end of every TV show, at the end of every movie, it may not be clearly stated, but the character would have gone through some changes. They would have learned something. Talk to them about Frozen, talk to them about, whatever movies they're watching or stories. Ask them to plot these stories back into their kind of story mountain if you teach them. It's a very good way to help them to figure out what the character arc is like, what the characters go through, and what they learn. Okay, what else? Short stories resources. So I've given some of you, these are all short stories actually. Some of these Audible, there are shorter stories. You've got to go and pick them out. There are also shorter stories on Libby Library. So if you look at, for example, I think I have some examples. Hang on. So like books like this one. This is actually a local storybook. So this is written by a local author. It's called Azoras. It's a 5-story series. This is very simple. Okay, so I mean, I'm not saying that primary sixers should read this. It's a very simple book, but these are considered short stories because they're very simple. It's very short. So this one I usually teach at primary 2, primary 3 level, but we want them to be able to read maybe 400 to 600, maybe 1,000 word stories at one shot. Yeah, so those are good. Newspapers are okay because newspapers, in fact, I'm not sure if you know this, but in Singapore, the Straits Times is pitched at a Sec 3 level. It means anyone who reads the Straits Times, who has a secondary 3 education level, they should be able to understand almost all of the words that are used in the paper. So ST is pitched at Sec 3, which might be a little bit higher for your kids. It could be enough. It really depends on your children's ability. Why it's not always and why it should not be the only resource is that at primary school level, they are not really going to be tested on that kind of format of reporting. You want them to be able to understand narratives, stories, rather than just reports, because we don't want them to be reporting in their stories. We want them to be describing effectively and using good phrases and all that. So newspapers are very dry. They're very, straightforward. It's not a very descriptive way of writing. Yeah, we definitely fiction, non-fiction. Yeah. How much time should you take to plan? If it's a PSLE format or PSLE situation, they only need to take 5 minutes at the most. So their planning needs to be very basic planning. They need to have their some people call it a story ladder, some people call it a story mountain, some people just call it a plot line. So basically, they need their beginning, climax, ending plotted out at the very least, so that they already know where they are going. Because I do find that kids start off writing very excitedly, get halfway through their compo and realize, oh no, I have not answered the question, or I'm completely going off track. So plan their essay first. At every point of their plan, make sure they have answered the question. It is still about a gift. It's still about an accident. It's still relevant to the question. It's still relevant to that picture that I chose. And then they can carry on writing from there. We do not want them to be wasting time, write half an essay, and then throw it out and restart, which some kids do. Then that gives them only 20 minutes to write an essay. How would we encourage reluctant readers? Start with basics. Just now when I gave you all those pictures about Geronimo Stilton and all that, if that's all they will read, then that's fine. Give them simple stories to start with. Give them picture books. That's okay. We really want to make sure that they are reading something. Anything at all, whatever kind of topics they prefer, whatever is interesting to them, try and address, get them to pick out their own books at the library. Although now we can't go to the library, which is very sad. But definitely get them to a reluctant writer. Oh, sorry. Okay, I see. Reluctant writer. Start with writing one paragraph at a time. So we don't want them to be writing full compose every day, like running a marathon. So get them just to write one paragraph. Say, okay, go and write me a paragraph describing your sister. Go and write me a paragraph describing someone that you hate. Go and write me a paragraph describing your room. Something very basic. Start with really small steps. Just one paragraph. Tell them write 10 sentences. Start off with 3 sentences if you need to. Then ask them, okay, with your 3 sentences, how can you make it better? What would you put in now? Would you add in an adjective somewhere? Would you add in a description somewhere? Tell them, I don't quite understand what's happening here. Can you explain it to me? So it's really baby steps. You've really got to kind of take it slow. Make sure that they get interested slowly and not, don't keep bombarding them with compose. Yeah. Okay, there's a lot of questions. I don't know if we can have time for everything. Andrew, you want to have a time check or anything? Otherwise, I'll take one last question. Learning issues, I think, is a topic for a separate another day. That one is, it really depends also on your own child's learning issues and attention issues. Those are quite separate things. Close and editing is a lot of grammar. So it's very hard for me to tell you like everything that we do to improve on close and editing. Maybe if I just address editing first of all. Editing has 6 spelling errors and 6 grammatical errors, which is something that not all the kids know, which is very strange. There are 12 questions in editing. 6 are spelling, 6 are grammar. So always get them, first of all, to sort out which are spelling errors and which are grammatical errors. Grammatical errors are very easy to pick out because the words are spelled correctly. So once the words are spelled correctly, it must be a grammatical error. Everything else is a spelling error. If the words look strange, which is very obvious to most people, if when they look at the word, you'll know that it's spelled wrongly. Separate them out first. And then for spelling errors, get them to replace. So if there's an R sound, because it's all phonetics, if there's an R sound, what else could they change it to? If it's an E sound, is it an E and I or Y and IE? Ask them to replace little by little. So change in different phonetic sounds until they kind of get what they want. Because again, it's one of those things where you can't really tell them to look for clues and hints. Spelling is you know it or you don't. So get them to try out different spellings in their pencil, right at the side, try all kinds of different permutations until they pick something that looks as best as possible, fits as best as possible. Okay, planning time, 5 minutes, really, not more than that. They shouldn't be taking too long to plan. The planning is just a very basic storyline. Give them, for example, ask them to write out main character, what happens to this character, what is the main problem, how is it solved? That's it. We don't want to go into any more than that. I think a lot of our kids are overly ambitious when it comes to writing. They are maybe guided by their longer novels or their very interesting stories, or sometimes they get very inspired, which is nice. But again, in the terms of a 45-minute span, they really need to rein it in. So keep it to one scene. You shouldn't be, for example, changing setting too much. You shouldn't jump from one location to another location and then another location. You shouldn't have more than 2 or 3 characters in your story. You shouldn't be like spanning a wide range of time. It means you wouldn't cover from the baby to primary school to an adult. No, they need a scene, one scene, a scene in the classroom, in the canteen, at home, on the way home from school. That's it. They need to limit themselves so that not to make it too complicated. The more complicated it is, the more settings there are, the more characters there are, the more complications there are in the story, the longer it's going to take to address. So really keep it simple. Yeah. I think in terms of difficulty, we are not looking for difficulty in plots. We're not looking for difficulty in character development. Those are basically just logical, realistic. What we look for in terms of difficulty are complex sentences, interesting vocabulary. For better students, maybe varied punctuation. Those are the parts which would differentiate them from a weaker student or a poorer essay. Not in terms of storyline. Storyline, really keep it simple, keep it straightforward. Doesn't need to be too difficult, doesn't need to be too complicated. Yeah.
All right, Elizabeth. I think there are two parents who want to speak.
Yes, go ahead.
Kim and El, do you want?
Yeah.
Parents, if you want to speak, you can raise your hands and then we just put you on the stage and you can address teacher Jobeth directly. Would anyone would like to just come on stage to say something?
Sorry, I need to drink water.
Yep.
Talk about today.
If you click on your hand, I'm not sure if it's accidental or anything like that. You can just okay, let's see who's.
That's me.
Oh, you. Okay, so I think not. Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think if nothing else, then I will hand over to May. Thank you, thank you, parents, for listening. I know it's a lot to absorb as well on a Saturday morning. Thank you.
Okay, good afternoon, parents. I'm Chair May. I'm going to talk about sharing about information with regards to PSLE maths. Let me begin with this post by a parent written to our education ministers regarding 2019 PSLE maths paper. All right, she felt that the paper 2019 PSLE maths paper is unreasonably tough, that children came out crying, deflated, demoralized. Her post actually struck a chord with many parents, and many parents agreed with what she says. One of the parents says that a handful of the children came out of the examination hall crying. However, on the other hand, there's also parents who feels otherwise. They felt that the paper, the 2019 paper, was properly set, truly reflect the standard deviations of the different standards with our P6 students. So let's look at what MOE replied. They say that the topic set is within the syllabus, and then they really assessed students' ability to understand and able to apply concepts. And for each national examinations, there will also be a balance of basic, average, and challenging questions. So zooming forward to 2020 paper, after this year PSLE paper, some of you may, have the same sentiment as just now, that parents, you will feel that the paper may be too tough for the children. However, you may also feel that it's just nice that my child is, thinks that is doable. But we realize that parents, we cannot control over the exam, whether it is difficult or easy. However, what we can control is how prepared our children are for PSLE examination. So to begin, to be able to be prepared, we need information. So how is actually PSLE paper set? Are they really a balance of, this type of questions, basic, average, and challenging questions? Before we go into that, let's look at the, scoring system of PSLE this year and next year. So for this year, 2020, we'll still be using the A star, A, B, C, D, E, and ungraded U grades scoring system. However, when we go to next year, which affect our P5 students, this is what it looks like. A this year may look like a achievement level of 4 next year. And then B this year may actually get a 45 marks, which is an achievement level of 6. Whether this is a better scoring system or not, this new system totally shows the standard of the students, how they score during the exam. There's no standard deviations. We're not comparing it with other levels of other students. Whether this is a better scoring system or not is a bit too early for us to tell. And like I said, we do not, get too concerned about how these scoring systems are done, because we cannot control. What we can control is preparing our children. So let's look at how are all these, weightages of different topics tested. Pre-2018, these are the, statistics. And then what is the changes now? A little bit of changes, more significant one is geometry. There's an increase of 5%, and statistic, there's an increase of 5%. So these are the other topics: whole numbers, fractions, decimal, ratio, percentage. Rate and speed is actually 4%, but it increased by 1% to 5%. All right, and then algebra is actually 5%, although some of the children may choose to use algebra to solve a lot of the problem-solving question as well. Okay, how would COVID, affect these test items? Before the circuit breakers is announced that it's going to be extended, Minister already says that they will not claw back from the June holiday. What they will do is probably, take out some topics that can be taken out from the exam. So later on, we will also look into what are the topics that might be taken out from the exam. And marking will also be lenient. And then, they may also apply consideration during grading. Okay, so what are the topics that we think might be taken out for this year exam? Announced in the education's site, they states pie chart and volume. However, we also strongly feel that net may be one of the topics that might be taken out, because ever since the haze period, net is advised by the school to be taught as the last P6 topic. So if they were to eliminate one of the topic to be taken out from PSLE, it should be net. We also feel that speed may also be taken out, because it's like a standalone, just leaving rate behind. So speed is just a small topic, having a percentage combined with rate of 5%. So they may also consider taking that out as well. So, but life still goes on, because majority of the topic will still be taught and tested. All right. Let's take a look at the assessment component for primary mathematics. So for AO1, we have, which is basically the recall facts, concept, rules, formula, very basic questions, 25%. Interpretations and applications, it increased by 45%. So they are taking it away from the reasoning, analysis, and the inference part. So that part decreased by 5%. So does that mean that the exams are getting easier? Well, I always tell my students, it all really depends on how prepared you are. If you are very prepared and you are exposed to all the different types of questions and all the different strategies, even if the exam becomes much more difficult, you'll realize that it is still very easy and doable for you. However, if you're not prepared and you're just knowing the basic, you only know the basic. So even if the papers gets 5% easier or 10% easier, you will think that it is still very challenging. So my emphasis is get the student prepared. So how do we prepare the students? To begin with, let's look at the primary math syllabus that will be tested. So what are we testing? The P1 to P6, what are we actually teaching our children in primary school maths? We teach them classifying, we teach them comparing, sequencing, generalizing, induction, deduction, analysis, synthesis. We also teach them heuristic skills like drawing a diagram, tabulating, putting them in tables and solving them step by steps. We teach them guess and check. We teach them working backwards. We also taught them how to simplify your questions. And then we also taught them considering special cases. There's always special cases, all right? What is not stated is visualizing skills. But visualizing skills is, although it's not stated, is a very important skill. let's look at one of these PSLE questions that causes the big discussion last year. It really tests a lot on visualizing skills. You know, now this is an opportunity for parents to take a look at these questions. I guess most of you would have seen this last year, because immediately after the PSLE exam, the students, the parents have posted these questions and, you know, start talking about why the children are so stressed out by these questions in the exam. This is the last second questions. All right, so what is the diameters of each semicircles? I'm going to give you a few 1 minute perhaps to think about how do you solve these questions. What do I mean by visualizing? What would you do if you are a student sitting in the examination hall? What would you do to solve this question? You can either write inside the chat box, or you can volunteer about what you can suggest that we should do. Okay, I saw a hand. Let me see. Hi, Chingy. Let me pause the music. Would you like to suggest how to solve this question? Chingy, your mic is not, how do I say, it's not...
Yeah, it's not turned on.
It's muted. Yeah, it's not turned on your side, so I couldn't let you speak. Ah, yes. All right. It's muted. Still cannot.
No, it's
Still cannot.
the device is muted. Her device.
Yeah, the device is muted. Okay, never mind. Let me go on first. Perhaps I can show you what I mean by visualizing. So how do we simplify these questions? If the students would have learned this skill about shifting the semicircle to one side, let's look at how we do it. We actually shift 5 semicircles to one side. Okay, so how do we solve these diameters? Okay, let me give out a text box for you to type in your answer. Sherwin, I couldn't take out the text box. Perhaps I would suggest they write the answer in the chat box.
Yes, use a chat box.
All right, thank you. Okay. Yep. Okay. All right. Okay, I've seen a lot of parents writing out the answer. Sherwin, would you like to help me to award the trophy to these parents who have answered? Thank you. Okay, I will go on to explain. All right, so the diameters, like what most parents say, is just 60 minus 24, which is actually 36. Okay, so you do notice that this question is not as tough as it looked like at first once you shift the decimal point, once you shift the semicircle to the left. All right, okay. Use the calculator values for pi to find the parameters of the figure. Round your answers to 2 decimal places. Now you notice that if you couldn't solve A, you will not be able to solve B as well. So with A, the diameter being solved, you'll be able to solve B, which is the parameters of this figure. To find the parameters of this figure, you will have to find the circumference of this 5 semicircle first. Then you add up all the other length here. Okay, so what is the formula for semicircle? It's half pi d. So since there's 5 semicircle, we have 5 times half pi d, and we get our answer. Diameters being 36, we get our answer 90 pi. For this kind of situations, they ask you to use calculator pi. So you type, calculator pi, you'll get your answer as 336.743. So remind your children that if it's to round off to 2 decimal place, they must always state 3 decimal place and show that they are rounding off to 2 decimal place to get the marks. All right. So equipping your child. So how do we equip your child? How do we prepare our child for this PSLE exam? We must equip them with fundamental concept. They must have breadth and depth. So what do we mean by that? So 4 operations of whole numbers without calculators. A lot of children from P5, ever since they begin to use calculator, they have not been using their brain a lot. Even simple calculation, they depended on calculator. So that's a very bad habit because they forgot that paper 1 still has a paper that requires them to not use calculator for these simple calculations. 4 operations of whole numbers, we start with divisions and multiplications, followed by addition and subtractions. So if a sentence, a number equations comes out with division and multiplications, they have to do from left to right. So first come, first serve. We are no longer using Bodmer's rule like what we used to do once upon a time, many years ago. They no longer use Bodmer's rule. So we use left to right. So followed by addition and subtraction. So if addition and subtraction comes in one equation, we do from left to right as well. They have to memorize multiplication and division table from 1 to 12. This really shorten calculation. However, do make sure that they check. Sometimes they are overconfident and they think that they know all the answers. Double check. Mental calculations allows them to, knows that they didn't press wrongly, because calculator, they do press wrongly as well. So it's just self-check. Mental calculation, check the calculator. The calculator is also checking their mental calculation. Conversions of units of measurements, formulas of area, parameters of geometric shapes, especially area of triangles, is just base times height. A lot of students remember that it's base times height, but they forgot the half because they learn in P5, early part of P5. By the time they reach P6, they've forgotten there's a half. They know that, triangles is not length and breadth, it's base and height. So they thought that's it. They've forgotten that a triangle is actually half of a 4-sided figure. So they have to learn all this formula at their fingertips, all right? So exposing them to different types of questions, this is very important. So they must learn all types of solving skills. They don't choose and pick. They don't say that, I just want to use model drawing. I just want to use this method. I do not want to learn other methods. It is important that they are exposed to all the different types. Model drawings is one. Ratio types. Ratio has a few types, changes versus unchanged. We have things like total remain unchanged or difference remains unchanged. So they must know how to identify the questions. The moment they see the question, they know that, I'm going to apply this method. Constructions of lines and shapes is also very easily neglected because they think it's so easy. Draw a square. Why would you not be able to draw a square? Why would you not be able to measure a 5 cm length and then draw squares? These are skills they learn since P2, but because of lack of practice and during exam, they may just overlook and they may miss by just 1 cm or 0.5 cm and then that's it, they get it wrong. Guess and check methods is one of the most cumbersome one, the most troublesome. I myself don't like, and I think it's a very silly method. However, I still emphasize that they must learn. They must know how to draw lines, what to put in every columns, because during exam, under tremendous stress, under time constraint, they forgot how to solve a certain questions. And then they realize that guess and check is really life-saving. I have so many PSLE students tell me that the last few questions they totally don't know how to do, and then they just use guess and check, and they are very surprised that they all manage to get the answer. Pattern questions, they must be exposed to different types of patterns, questions, and relate to real life situation as well. So basic facts must be committed to memory. Things like 10% is 0.1, 20% is 0.2, and so on and so forth. And 50% one look we know is half, and 75% is 3/4. This tends to appear in paper 1 question, multiple choice. And students get very complacent with this type of question. They think it's so easy, 1 mark, and they tend to lose it because of carelessness, because of complacency. So make sure that these are all memorized, in their fingertip. Knowing conversion at your fingertips will cut down the calculation times and less prone to making errors. Identifying square numbers really helps as well in pattern questions. They're able to identify that 4, 9, 16, they straight away know that it's square numbers. This appears in pattern questions. And they know that the moment that they know that it's a square numbers, it really boosts confidence, it reduces the stress, and they realize that they can solve it with no issue. And then it decreases the chances of making mistakes and save time, really save time. Cube numbers would be for volumes, which might be taken out from the PSLE this year, and triangular questions, very, very common in pattern questions as well. Okay, so these are the things that we taught them as well in our lessons. So number series will be useful for pattern questions. Conversions at their fingertips. They must know meter to centimeters is times hundreds, and from cm to meter is division, divide by hundreds. The other things that students always miss out is every time they solve the question, finish solving the question in cm, they didn't notice that they're very excited because they solved the question. After a whole long tedious process, they solved the question and they wrote the answer as 200 cm. They didn't notice that the question actually wants them to have the answer in meter. So they didn't convert it to meter and they lose that precious 1 mark. It's so easy to convert back to 1 meter. So remind the students not to be too excited to go to the next question. Check back the question, whether they have answered the question fully and they have write the correct unit for them, for that question. Okay, so unit, please check. What else? Basic heuristic skills must be strengthened. Like I said earlier, let me emphasize it. So we are talking about drawing of diagrams, tabulating, guess and check, working backwards, simplifying of problems, and considering special cases and visualization, shifting concept, shifting of figures and shapes in a composite figures. So drill and guided practice. So at the end, we are talking about practice, and more practice, they will definitely make progress. All right, we believe in maths is always like that. The end results of practice. But here we are talking about not just practice blindly, doing papers after papers, like what Jobeth has said. Not just doing blindly and keep making exactly the same mistakes. So guided practice, questions that has been done wrongly, with guided practice, they sharpen their skills with that kind of questions. How do we solve it with a different strategies for different type of questions? So guided practice, let me emphasize it, so that their knife gets sharper and sharper when they go, before they go for PSLE exams. Conclusion. So if we were to convert alphabeticals A to Z to numeric numbers, and we add up the numeric figures for knowledge, we get 96%, and for hard work, we will get 98%. So which one do we get 100%? And that's attitude. So in our way of teaching, we give them a very safe and non-threatening environment. We like to instill joy in the way they learn. So all this is to make sure that they have a very positive towards learning, positive attitudes towards learning, so that they don't find learning so scary, learning such a chore. They enjoy. So we feel that if they enjoy learning maths and science and English, they will definitely improve. That's the end for my sharing. If you have any questions. Do we have any questions?
Parents like English, you can type in the chat box, so you can
put up your virtual hands.
Algebra.
Can you use algebra in PSLE Maths? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. But make sure that they know what they are representing. Actually, a lot of questions like, we always shorten like 2 shorts plus 2 t-shirts equals to $5. We are already using algebra. So we use 2s plus 2t equals to $5. So we are using algebra. Yes, PSLE do accept. If it's clearly, the steps are very logical. Yes. Yes. So don't use Spotman's rule. I saw one question. Don't use Spotman's rules. Only left to right. No. Okay. What you gave me was 12 plus 2 times 3. 12 plus 2 times 3. Okay, let me take out the questions here. 12 plus 2 times 3 equals. Okay, I cannot take out the question. Anyway,
I put
12
it up
plus.
on top
Yeah.
on the screen.
Okay. All right. Thank you. 12 plus 2 times 3. There's a plus and a times. Times come first before the plus. We're talking about if it's only times and divide, we do from left to right. If times come first, so if it's 2 times 3 divided by 4, then we do the times first. Yeah. Yes. So for the first question here, 12 plus 2 times 3, we have to do the times first. So times and divide come first, followed by plus and divide, a plus and minus. So if this one appeared in the same sentence, then we do left to right, plus, times, and divide. All right? Hope that answered the question. Because Botman's rule says that we must do division first, followed by multiplication. So it's wrong. Botman's rule says division first, followed by multiplication. No, if multiplication comes first, like this case, 2 times 3, we do times first, then we can do divide. Yep. All right, so
There's a hand.
yep, there's a hand. Can the hand put up again so I can see who is putting up the hand? Sorry, I missed it. Okay, so let me answer. Model comparison is taught and tested. All right, okay. Let me answer that question first. Yes.
Oh, hi, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for the sharing. I think that's great. Just would like to ask for your advice. My son is still in P5, so what would be your 1 or 2 tips for me as a parent to having the luxury of additional 1 year to prepare him for PSLE?
Like I said, we expose. Okay, thank you for your question. Practice, and then expose. Of course, I do not want to sell our program. So I would feel that through our TCHER lessons, we do teach them the different types of skills to solve problem, and that's very, very important, because when they know the different strategies to solve different problem sums, and then one look at the question, they know exactly, oh, I've learned this, and then I know this is the strategies I'm going to use. So it's just practice and practice. So we taught them model drawings. We cannot do any shortcuts. So there's some students that just want to do algebra. That's not the way, because certain questions cannot solve by algebra. So we do expose them to all the different types of questions. We emphasize model drawing. We teach them the 4 different types of ratio questions. We taught them the different strategies to solve different types of questions. We teach them patterning questions, where we do just now the triangular number. So these are exposure to the different strategies which we taught them. Yeah. So it's just guided practice, not just blindly test, try and error. Oh, I think I can try this way. I try that way. So it's really guided practice, and then sharpening their skills with that strategies that they have been taught. Yes. Okay, I have seen another question say, how can we help kids with their visualization skills? So composite figures has a lot of visualizing skills. So we shift the shapes around to help them solve the questions. So no shortcuts in maths. It's still practice and guided practice as well. So model comparison is taught and tested in P5 and 6. They are not tested, model drawings are not tested, but they are just, it is supposed to help them. These models are just like, bullets giving them use to use at war, during PSLE is like war. So they have a bullet to use. Oh, I can use model drawing, comparison model to solve this question. And with the visual, it keep them on track on what they are actually finding the answer for. Because sometimes after they solve for the 5 steps, they've forgotten what they are solving, and then they just go to the next question because thinking that they already solved it. But the model really guides them and let them realize that I haven't finished solving at all. That's what model is about. Must working be shown for short answers? 2 marks. They still require some working to be shown, but they do not penalize if actually you just show the answer. Yeah, but it's still good to show that how they get the answer. Yeah, but not the simple step like 2 divided by 1 or whatever. Yes. Does your programs include giving answer practice sums after the lessons? Must units be shown in answer? Must units be shown in answer? For paper 1, the units are given, but not problem sum. Problem sums units are not given. So for meter, centimeter, dollars, and you must give your own units. You must write your own unit, but not for, if the answers is question is asking you for ping pong ball, you don't need to write 20 ping pong ball. But do remember dollar signs, if you're writing decimal place, there must be 2 decimal place. So if it's $2.50, it must be 2.50. If you write 2.5, that's considered a mistake. Yeah. Does our programs includes giving students practice sums after the lessons? We do not have this practice of giving students practice after the lessons. We make it in such a way that the questions and the problem sums are usually solved within the lessons. However, we always include PSLE questions. PSLE questions, past year PSLE questions in the program. So sometimes they might find that it's too difficult to solve. So the teacher may explain and they may not get it on the first try. So we do encourage the students to look at the video again and then try it themselves again before they look at the solution. So this is what we encourage children to do. They can redo the questions. They don't have to do new questions, but they can redo the questions by practicing on the questions that has been done in the lessons. Yeah. All right, thank you. So I will pass the time to Sherwin for science section. Thank you. So you can continue to type so we can answer them. Thank you.
Hello, parents. I'm Sherwin, part of the science team at TCHER. Okay, let me just do a quick adjustment. Okay, allow me to take you directly to the crux of the matter. As mentioned by May earlier, there was a change in what's going to be assessed this year for PSLE. Now, I understand some of you are parents of not P6 kids, but maybe P5 or P earlier. Not to worry, this change does not affect you, or does not affect your child, I mean. Okay, now following the extension of the circuit breaker, so MOE has identified certain topics, we call them CLTs or common last topics, which will not be assessed for PSLE 2020 this year. So for science in particular, what has been excluded will be interactions within the environment. Now, it seems like it's just one topic, but it's actually a very big change. Okay, within this topic itself, there are 4 subtopics. All right. Okay, the first being environment. Now, these are factors that affect the environment, the biotic, abiotic. There are a total of 7 of them. Relationships among the organisms. Now, they don't have to learn big words like symbiotic and stuff like that, but they have to show understanding that organisms within an environment or community affect one another. They help one another. They can also cause harm to one another. How animals survive, organisms survive in the environment. Now, the other subtopic is web of life. This shows the energy transfer from one organism to the next, and the sun being the main source of energy. Man and environment. Now, this is a really huge topic. It introduces global warming, acid rain, pollution, deforestation, greenhouse effect, as well as man's efforts to undo all these wrongs that have been done to planet Earth. And the last one being adaptations, the structural and behavioral adaptations of animals in order to survive. Now, so what, truth be told, we are all still trying to make sense of this year, what's going to happen to this year's PSLE. We're also waiting further clarification on whether one or all of these subtopics will be included, or some of it will be tested still. So we're not because we're not so sure about these topics, but it is rather surreal kind of feeling, because the science paper this year is going to look totally different from that of past years. Okay, let me explain. Now, these are all the life science topic. Okay, so just hold that thought first. Now, how did we come up with the 4 subtopics? We didn't just pluck it out from the air. This is the MOE document that you can download online. So we have identified, these are the 4 main topics, all taken from the learning outcomes as described by MOE. Okay, now adaptations may, okay, under adaptations, oops, here. Now, part of it will still be tested. This is what we think, because at primary 3 and 4 level, they learn about how living things respond to changes around them. So that concept is still valid, although it has to do a little bit with adaptations for survival, but responding to the changes in the environment will still be tested. So for that reason, we may touch a little bit on adaptations, or schools may still include a little bit on adaptations. Now, if you don't already know, this is a structure of the science paper, booklet A, booklet B. Booklet A, 28 MCQ questions comprising 14 life science, 14 physical science, in that order, the first 14 and the next 14. Booklet B, total of 44 marks, equally divided into life science as well as physical science. Now, it might be 6, it might not be 6, it depends. So long as there are an equal apportionment of marks, 22 marks for both areas. Now, what will be very affected will be the life science components of booklet A and B, because environment is tested very heavily in both sections. Okay, life science, things like definitions, they are not asked about definitions per se, but they have to understand what certain words mean. For example, organism, what a population means, what a community means, in order to answer the multiple choice questions. And for the structured questions here, now historically there'll be at least two questions on that. Okay, it's just not adaptations per se, but it's also tied in with a lot of physical science topics. For example, heat. Heat is physical science. So it can be an experiment on heat in part A, followed by an animal adaptation in parts B. So this, because of that, the bigger idea is adaptation. So it'll be parked under life science. So there'll be a big shift. Okay, just a quick look at what the topics covered are in primary school, divided into lower block P3, P4, upper block P5 and 6, and classified across the 5 themes. And interaction within the environment is over here. Okay, now the topics here, we have pulled out all the life science topics from the previous page to summarize them here. The text in blue are the lower block topics, P3 and P4, while the text in dark red will be the upper block topics. Okay, and to further describe them, explain a little bit more. Now, P6, there are most schools, I would say most schools, in fact, all the schools that I know of, teach interactions within the environment at primary 6. And they teach all the other topics at primary 5. So circulatory, respiratory, photosynthesis, reproduction, and all that. All these are covered at primary 5. So in fact, if you look at the next screen here, if in school your child has already been taught forces and energy conversion, which is deals with the potential kinetic energy from change from one form of energy to another, effectively all the topics have been covered. Okay, because all these parts, all these here are under environment. So revision actually doesn't really start when school reopens in June. You can actually start revision right now. Now, having said that, I believe schools still will continue to cover the common last topics under environment, because without it, primary science education specifically is incomplete. Now, let me explain why. It's actually an integral part of science education. Okay, lower block, before P6, they are taught the relation to connect the textbook with the real world, right? Then when they reach primary 6, most pupils have attained a certain level of maturity, and they begin to form impressions and opinions of their own. And so it's no longer about the textbook and the real world, making that relations between the textbook and the real world, but it's a textbook, the real world, and me. So me meaning what can I do? What can I do with what I'm learning? Is there some way I can help with climate change? How may I improve the environment conditions around me? Now, actually from here, a lot of them may be inspired or may embark on paths in which they are passionate about. For example, marine biology or something like that. Okay, now just very quickly, why do students enjoy science? In P3, they are exposed to science. They're taught diversity of living things. So they learn about diversity of living things, and then they go to the school garden and they pick up leaves and all that. So it's very real. And then at PE, they kick a ball or they throw a ball, and then they learn about forces. So it's very relevant to their lives. And when it comes to the topic of environment, it's very relevant to their future sustainability of planet Earth. Now, after a while, they start disliking science. Okay, this I'm speaking from experience. A lot of students, their confidence take a battering, a huge battering, in fact, because it's like I like science, but my marks don't show it. I know that light travels in a straight line. I know how shadows are formed, but I look at this question, I have no idea where to start. Okay, I have no clue at all. Now, these are some suggestions like Jobeth mentioned earlier. Try not to look at the scores. I know some of us are guided with our words. Perhaps we don't say it when we see marks that are not too ideal. We don't say it, but it shows in our actions. For example, the day after exam results are released, suddenly there's a pile of science assessment book on the table. Why is that so? You know, it's good to often check their understanding, because PSLE is all about checking for understanding. Now, it's not about trying to penalize children for being unable to express what they understand, but the whole rationale behind PSLE marking is to try to award marks for if the pupil is able to make a reasonable connection or show reasonable understanding in what is being covered. Now, for instance, how do you show understanding of check understanding and conversation? For example, I know if you take walks in right now, I know it's COVID, but you still can take walks with one person. So if you walk under an angsana tree, for example, and you pick up the angsana fruits, now you can just bring it up and talk about it. You know, like why is there this wing-like structure? How does this wing-like structure help it to stay afloat for a longer time? Things like that. Of course, to know all this, you will have to do a little bit of homework. You will have to go through their textbooks. Now, it's not a difficult process because their textbooks are not that thick. It's fairly thin, what's provided by the publishers. They are quite easy to read through or glimpse through. You can look at their workbooks, pick out the keywords and phrases that the teachers have perhaps underlined or made them right, and you can use them like stay afloat for a longer time, wing-like structure. These are examples. And we can also intrigue them with phenomenon like eclipses, which happened last year, even the current situation, viruses. How do our bodies respond to viruses? Okay, let them enjoy nature. And there are a lot of toys at home that can actually teach science, because toys make use of energy, some of them to move. You have potential energy, you have elastic potential energy also within toys that allow them to move, produce heat, produce sound, produce light. Okay, another suggestion is to try to relate what happens at home to science. This is like a real life example. If your child needs a particular shirt and for the next day, for example, house practice, and horror of horrors, the night before, you realize that the shirt is still in the laundry basket. Now, what do you do? What can you explore to dry the shirt and get it ready for the next day? So this has to relate to the rates of evaporation. And then you can make use of analogies like, I know we can be creative. If you look at the textbook, there's the cell systems. Now, cells is a very difficult topic to teach because it's not visible. Now, the textbook shows a very colorful representation of cells, animal cells and plant cells. So a lot of students, they go to the science lab because they're going to look through the microscope. And when they look through the microscope, they don't see what exactly appears in the textbook. And a lot of them are very disappointed, because so I say it because not every student get to see exactly what a cell looks like. So the teacher can ask, so how many of you saw the cell wall? And and half the class didn't put up their hands because they look through the microscope, they don't know exactly what to look for, and in a big class size, it's very hard to guide the students to one by one to make sure that they see what they're supposed to see. So you can make use of analogies like that. In this case, this is just one example. How does a cell membrane works? It's just like gate security in a factory to control the movements of substances in and out. Okay, one of the ways that okay, the next 3 slides I'll just showcase some of the features that we have in Class In, this app that we are on now. We make use of text boards to get students to answer questions like this. Now, yesterday I just showed this. Yesterday we had the same workshop. I just showed this question, and then I didn't really show the answers, and then there were feedback. A lot of parents wanted to know the answer. So now, because there are more than 50 of you today, I'm not able to share the text board. There's a restriction why our class size not a lot. Now, if you look at this question, okay, the diagram shows how a balloon moves when air escapes from it. If there is no wind in the room, explain why the balloon does not move in a straight line. Now, when this question was asked, a lot of students for that particular year, 2016, had no clue whatsoever how to approach this question. Now, this is a Part B question. So Part A is not really related to this Part B. So I can show it in isolation like that. Now, does anyone have a clue? I can't share the text board now today, as I do in a regular class. Now, if you think you want to shed some light on how we can approach this question, you can click on your virtual hand, or you can type in the chat box. I'll just give you some think time. Now, a lot of pupils after that paper, they ask, or they ask me whether their answers are correct. So a lot of them wrote, gravity acted on the balloon. Okay. Air, when escaping, has kinetic energy. Yes, there's kinetic energies, but the things that, thank you, Annie. Sorry, when I see you later, I just give you a trophy. Now, kinetic energy, the things that students are required to explain why it did not move in a straight line, right? So the straight line part is crucial, it's essential to the whole thing. Now, a lot of pupils wrote, gravity acted on the balloon. Now, gravity acted on the balloon, yes, true, and that will cause a balloon to move in this path. But gravity acted in a balloon does not explain this part of the curve, the movement. So kinetic energy, yes, it has, because that causes it to move. But what causes it not to move in a straight line? So now it is a very challenging questions, but something that we can take comfort in. If the question is very challenging like this, it is 1 mark question, right? 2 mark questions will require more thinking and more structure to that, and students will know how to approach a 2 mark question better than a 1 mark question. Okay, so for such a question, we'll take, let me see the other response. Okay, elastic potential energy. Now, we take our pupils to the basic of forces, what they learn in forces. For instance, the first thing they learn about force is that a force can be a push or a pull. So we get them through the process of remembering push or pull. And in this case, it's not a pulling force that the balloon has, but a pushing force. The next thing they learn about forces, the effects of forces. A force can move a stationary object, it can stop a moving object, can change the speed and direction of a moving object. So these are the things that they learn, they have to recall, and the parts of it. Okay, a force is a push, and a force can change direction of moving object. Now the direction has to come in because of this part here, does not move in a straight line. So we guide students to think a little bit more. Yes, what was pushing the balloon? It was the air that was pushing the balloon, and cannot just say air because air is all around us. You have to be more specific about where the air is coming from. So air that is coming from out from the balloon. So to put it all together, all the thoughts, air that is coming out from the balloon pushes it in different directions, and this is the one mark. Very basic. Now a lot of students have no clue how to start answering this question, because if this same question were to be asked at a secondary level, the answer that they have to come up with will be very different, because it depends a lot on what they have learned. Likewise, at JC level, if you take physics at A level, you have to answer this question in a very different way because you learn more. So the easiest way is to let your child know that all the questions that are being asked, they have the ability to answer it, because it has to be something that they have learned before. It cannot be something out of the blue. All right. I cannot be guessing an answer. It has to be something that I've learned before. Right. So this is another tool that we use. The same tool, the text board, but we don't get them to type out the whole answers, but we give them part of the answers. For example, now this question pertains to a boy coming out from a swimming pool, and around the pool there are a lot of fans blowing, essentially to keep the floor of the pool dry to prevent accidents. Now, when the fan blows on this boy, when he just out from the pool, he feels a lot colder. So the question requires them to explain why this boy feels colder when the fan is blowing on him. All right. So this is the proposed answer. The wind increased the rate of evaporation from his body, because students understand the concept that evaporation causes cooling. So water on his body evaporated and caused him to feel colder. Now, parents, can I have your comments, please, if you have any, on the answer? Do you feel that it's complete or not complete? And which part of it is not complete? Yes, thank you, Mabel. You have to mention about losing heat. Losing heat. Yes, the body loses heat. Okay, you're right. Anything else? Now, if I... Okay, yes, some of you mentioned heat loss from the skin, hotter to colder. So there is a movement of concept of heat being lost, moving from a hotter to a colder place, lose heat. Okay, a lot of you mentioned lose heat. Answer is not complete. We need to say about losing heat. Now, okay, let me show you what we have to include. Now, this question is related to water cycle. Now, water cycle is always tested in the open-ended question every year, all right, in one form or the other. Sometimes it's ice cubes. They often use this term, white mist, white cloud, things like that, to describe. Now, when you mention evaporation, you always have to talk about water, because not only water evaporates, other liquids evaporate also. All right, they have different boiling points, or they have different temperatures. Now, his body felt cooler, his body lost heat, but the water, in order to evaporate, now students are taught that before you write evaporate, you have to talk about gaining heat. Before you talk about condensation, you have to talk about losing heat. So lose heat, condense, gain heat, evaporate. So the water gained heat from his skin and evaporated. Okay, then there has to be, why is it colder? There is a comparison here. So evaporated more quickly. And after evaporation, you must also talk about what does it form, water vapor. So water cycle questions in the structured open-ended questions are always 2 marks, because it includes a lot of keywords like that, or key phrases. Okay. All right. If you want, you can take a quick screenshot of this. Let me delete all the marks. Okay, let's move on. Now, another tool that we use is the drawing board. Drawing boards like this, we cut out this and send it to the students, and they make use of the criteria given to them to complete the circuit diagram. So they make use of the drawing tools to draw the wires, to put in the switches and all. Now, drawing board is also very useful in not just for electricity, we use for forces, to identify where the forces are, for labeling of diagrams. For example, we just give them a cell, a plant cell, for example, and ask them to label the parts, and also to draw graphs. Now, these are the achievable goals that we want to talk about. Parents, you can work with us. Now, the whole idea of science education is not to overwhelm them with a lot of information that they need to synthesize. Now, we want them to be able to process information critically. All right. And then again, as May said earlier, how do students do that? They have to practice a lot more. Okay, and they have to know identify the concepts with precision, like the balloon question earlier. Now it was about the balloon flying, but what topic? Is it energy? Is it forces? Is it is it about air having definite shape? No, so you have to students have to recall exactly what they have learned. And primary school content is not a lot, actually. It is fairly simple. So they just have to have a process of recalling what they have learned and pulling out the correct concepts. And then they have to craft responses confidently. Now, this is again through practices. Now, we can make use of structured frameworks. Now, schools use frameworks like CAR, the claim, evidence, reasoning framework, to help students craft open-ended questions or responses. Now, all these frameworks work, but not all the time, because sometimes they can be a bit tedious, a bit heavy going. So it does not apply to every question. So some questions you can use templates like how to answer a fair test question, how to state a relationship. Relationship is like the greater the amounts of water, the healthier the plant. That's a relationship kind of question. Templates also like how to state aim, but okay, they stop asking that kind of questions. Now, essentially at PSLE, answers that are memorized and regurgitated without understanding, this type of questions have been removed already. For example, why did Tom repeat his experiments 3 times? So in the past, when students saw this kind of questions, they were very happy because 1 mark is given to them. They can just think about, oh, increased reliability of results. Because it's a memorized response, it shows no understanding whatsoever pertaining to the question, right? So over time, all these questions have been removed. So it has become a little bit more challenging. But that's why we need students to be able to analyze, process information critically. Whatever is given to them cannot be guesswork. All the information have to be provided in the question. Okay, this is what we do at TCHER. The curriculum structure, I won't delve on that. But essentially what we do, we show them at the start of every topic, we show them these are the relevant PSLE questions that we want to attempt. This is the end goal. And then we show them how by teaching, and then we consistently guide them. So this is the method that we use. So parents, I'm saying that you can use the same methods to help your child. All right. Now, I believe that's all I have for science. Do you have any questions? If not, I'll just invite Andrew back into the chat. There.
Do you want to answer them?
Oh,
Maybe just pick 1 or 2. Then I'll just close the session. It's almost
okay.
2 hours. Thank you, parents, for staying. I know some have left, but you need to go. Please do. Yes, Sharon, quickly.
Yeah. Do we revise P3 to P6 work? It's not overwhelming, Mabel. It is necessary. P3 and P4 work is actually very light. So they just have to know how to integrate all these information. And PSLE is tested from P3 to P6, not just P6 work, right? So I think...
Any more? Okay, parents, so I think we'll close the session. You have any question, you can actually SMS or WhatsApp to the customer service staff who have been calling you or messaging you. Okay, I know there's one last part about how to support your children. Yeah, I just want to say that you have to keep yourself positive and also very motivated, create a very loving, wonderful environment at home. That is really, really the best way, right? I have 4 children, and so my wife and myself also, we have to keep ourselves very positive, very fun, and do fun things together. And also, of course, together with your child, learn with them. For sure, I think some parents also will join them in the lessons or for other online lessons, right? Sit in with your kids if they allow. Sometimes I know our students ask the parents, say, please leave the room, and then they want to be on their own. But the lessons are video recorded, so you can actually play, and then you can have the same lingo, so to speak, right? You know what is booklet A, B for math, for science, and then you know how to encourage. You also develop empathy for your children. That is really, really not very easy, right? To do the PSLE questions and to take the PSLE. Okay. And then other than that, we'd like to invite you and your kids to try our lessons, right? We do have trial lessons for you after this workshop, right? You can actually sign up. Is there any questions that you want to ask? If not, we'll be ending very soon because we're really, really over time. Okay, they will say very good workshop. Thank you. You go through the complete science education, right? Do you have anything for us? Right. We will, we're really very happy for you to be here. What we will do is that we'll make the video available, in fact, just for 2 days, but after that we will edit and then make it into like different parts, like Teacher Jobe have the English part, then the science, and then the math, and we see how we can make it available for you. Okay. So I think that's all. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, any question you can contact us. right? All the customer service. Thank you, parents. Sherwin, can we have the closing music? Thank you. Okay, bye everybody. Thank you, everyone. Yes, thank you. Have a good weekend. You can see all the chat. Thank you. Bye. Yes, take care, everybody. Keep safe. Enjoy your weekends.